The good news doesn't start yet, though, because Rishi Sunak gave another speech earlier today. Did you see it? Many people saying, actually, that it was the start of his election campaign, that's how it felt to many. I've got to say, the overwhelming kind of topic of conversation was all about defence, and it was a lot along the lines of, Daniel, that he was saying things like the next 5 years is going to be kind of more change-defining, etc., than the past 30 years. He was speaking a lot about the fact that you've seen the likes of China and Russia joining up to potentially pose a threat. He talked a lot about the need for defence and nuclear and all the rest of it. Is he trying to terrify us into voting Tory, do you think?
Well, I think he'd like us to vote Conservative, obviously, and that's what the leader of the Conservative Party does. But I don't think he's unduly terrifying people. I think things have changed dramatically in the last few years, and the aggressive states, the ones that look to invade their neighbours and take territory simply through warfare, are ganging up together, and they are not on our side. And I think we have to be aware of that. That's a big change from where things were, as he says, 20 or 30 years ago. After the fall of the Iron Curtain and so forth, we looked like we were set for a period of peace and calm, bolstered by trade and mutual prosperity. Things have gone badly wrong in the last few years, and they've gone against us. And I think the consequence of that is that we will have to end up spending more money on defence, and we will have to be more alert and work more closely with our allies and actually try to make sure that we come through this. You say
spending more, 2.5% of GDP by 2030, of course, is one of the Tories' core pledges. He reckons it's going to make savings and cuts to the civil service to try and fund that. But he was also, Rishi Sunak, today, talking quite tough about Keir Starmer and about how he would approach things. Listen.
Despite having 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, Labour have almost nothing to say about it. No plans for our border, no plans for our energy security, no plans for our economy either, and no principles either. Keir Starmer's gone from embracing Jeremy Corbyn to Natalie Elphicke, all in the cynical pursuit of power at any price. So Labour have no ideas. What they did have, they've U-turned on.
Is that fair, Jo?
No, I think it's a real shame, actually, that a topic that is very serious, and I completely agree with Daniel, and I agree with some of the things that the Prime Minister said. You know, we are living in a world that is changing very quickly. And, you know, we've got China, we've got Iran, we've got North Korea, we've got all sorts of things going on. And I think old alliances have gone. We've also got one of the biggest threats that is not traditional warfare. It's the warfare of fake news and misinformation, which is being manipulated by less friendly nation states, shall we say. But I think it's a real shame that Rishi Sunak, in trying to look like a statesman and a world leader, then ended up turning it into a rather silly sniping at Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And when he says that they've had 14 years to think about it and they've come up with something, well, the obvious answer to that is, well, he's had 14 years, or the Tories have had 14 years, and he's coming up with a bold plan. He's in danger of sounding like Baldrick from Blackadder.
Is he?
Well, no, I think it's a fair challenge to the Labour Party. We're now within a few months, very few months of an election. In fact, it was possible we could be in an election period now. There was talk of having a spring or summer, early summer election. And the Labour Party has told us almost nothing about what their policies are if they come into government. And they're going to have to do this at some point. And they can't keep running away and not telling us what they're going to do. There are a few small policies that have come out, like putting VAT on private schools, which is just purely vindictive and, you know, is virtue signalling in a way. It's not going to make any difference to the vast majority of people, except that they'll have more pupils trying to crowd into their schools. But we just don't know what they're going to do. And that's a deliberate policy by the Labour Party. It's what they call their Ming vase policy of walking, you know, without dropping across a polished floor without dropping the Ming vase, by actually having any policies. But they're going to have some policies. And the point about Keir Starmer, remember Keir Starmer, the leader of the campaign for a second referendum, the great supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, and now Natalie Elphicke, I think is a point very well made.
Well, that Natalie Elphicke,
no principle.
It hasn't really gone down very well, has it?
I cannot, for the life of me, think what Keir Starmer was thinking of. I mean, on so many levels, it is so inconceivably stupid.
Why?
Because, well, several things, really. I mean, first of all, the announcement on Wednesday, just before Prime Minister's questions, actually took away the gloss and the shine that Labour could have had from their new MP for Blackpool, elected during the by-election, their success in the local and mayoral elections, apart from Teesside. And I think if I had been a Labour activist working really hard to get those people elected, I'd have felt jolly cross. Natalie Elphick's organisation was putting out leaflets on Tuesday saying Labour are rubbish, they're dreadful, they're just going to have open borders. On Wednesday, she's joined the Labour Party. She doesn't bring anything to the Labour Party apart from a lot of questions and a lot of baggage, and I think lots of people will be questioning his political judgment on this.
Well, let's have a look how Starmer responded to some of what Sunak was saying earlier on.
The first duty of any government, particularly an incoming Labour government, is national security, the security of the country, and that would be my first priority. Now, the Prime Minister today has made a speech. I think it's his 7th reset in 18 months, and I think that really shows you that the choice as we go into this election is now pretty clear.
Do you think it is pretty clear? Because this is one of the things, I mean, you just alluded to it there when you're saying, what do Labour actually stand for? What are their policies? Because we do know various different things, like they had that new deal for the workers where they were going to basically like rip up everything and rewrite it and start again. We know that that's been kind of pared back. We know about that, the whole new Green Deal, that to some extent has been pared back as well. But is this just basic politicking? Are they keeping their cards close to their chest, or do you think that they just don't really know policy-wise what they stand for, really?
Well, I can't give an insight into what their internal thinking is, but it seems to me that what they're actually doing is they're trying to move in the public's mind as far to the right as they possibly can, because they think that's going to help them win the election. They'd say move towards the centre, but as far to the right as they possibly can in Labour Party terms. So they've ditched. He's crushed a lot of left-wing people, and Diane Abbott isn't even a member of the party anymore, as far as I understand, and so on. And Corbyn and those people have been kicked out. Lots of the candidates who've been chosen are Keir Starmer lookalikes. They're all identikit Keir Starmers who'll be standing as MPs. He's moving to the right. What we don't know, though, is if he gets power, how much he's going to stay on the right and how much he'll start drifting back to his roots on the Corbynite left where he used to be so active. That's the point. We don't know until we see the details of policies. What are you actually going to do about some of the big issues facing the country? And on that, he's told us very little indeed.
Steve, one of my viewers, says, Michelle, Rishi Sunak is the reason that for the first time in my life I will not be voting Conservative at the next general election. He says there's two things that the Tories could do to get my votes. One would be, he says, number one, for Rishi Sunak to resign. And number two, for Rishi Sunak to disappear into oblivion forever, he says.
That's a bit harsh.
Indeed. There have been some rumours, I mean, I'm not suggesting that there's any fact to these, but just suggestions of rumours and thoughts that David Cameron might somehow be angling for a repositioning of himself for a potential Tory leader. What do you think to that?
I don't see why he would. I mean, he's come back. He's doing a good job as far as we can tell as Foreign Secretary. He's he's got doors opening for him because of his previous time as Prime Minister. He's known, he's recognised. There was a very good piece in the Sunday Times at the weekend by Christina Lamb, their extremely respected foreign correspondent, who'd spent time with him in Kazakhstan, I think it was. He's on top of his brief. He's got energy. He's got a certain charisma. I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of David Cameron, but I think he's doing a good job. And, if you want to do a compare and contrast, you've got David Cameron, you've got David Lammy, who may or may not be a Labour Foreign Secretary if they win. I think the other thing about this speech that Rishi Sunak's made, and to a certain extent to address what Daniel's talking about policy, in the end, it's what people feel. And I think people have, by and large, had enough of the Conservative Party. It doesn't mean to say they want Keir Starmer or the Labour Party. I think they just want change.
And what do you think to this Cameron? Do you think David Cameron would ever want to be the Tory leader again?
Well, I think it's wild speculation, but I will say this. and watching him in the House of Lords or seeing him do his job and being on the telly. David Cameron is undoubtedly a class act. Now, I don't agree with him about all his policies and everything he's done, but he is a Conservative and he is a class act. But I don't think the future of the Conservative Party lies necessarily in going back. And I think he'd see that as well. The future of the Conservative Party, whether in government or in opposition after the next general election, lies in going forward.
But he was, if you ask me, he was neglectful in his role because, of course, he gave us that Brexit referendum. But there seemed to be no planning whatsoever as to what we'd actually do as a country if people voted to leave the European Union. Then everyone will remember the morning of that result, he just packed his bag and ran away.
Well, I think that's a little unfair. I think it was...
What's unfair about that?
Because I think, actually, if you are the Prime Minister and you have a policy and that policy is rejected, major policy, and that policy is rejected, then our tradition is that the Prime Minister would say, well, I don't have the confidence of the House of Commons if it was rejected in the Commons, or at least in this case, I don't have the confidence of the country. How can I carry on? And I can't do a turn on a sixpence and say I didn't believe everything I said. So I think it was perfectly honourable for him to resign. I do agree with you, however, on this question. I think the government should have prepared for both outcomes and had a plan as to what they were going to do. And it was a deliberate decision by the government not to do that. And I think that was a very bad step. And I know they did it because they thought if they started planning for it, it would give people, encourage people somehow to vote for Brexit. But they decided not to do that. That was a mistake. But I think it was very honourable of him, actually, to resign. And it does him great credit that he recognised that you can't be as dishonest as that.
Well, do you give David Cameron credit? Do you think he would make a good future leader of the Tory party? Again, one of my viewers has got in touch, said the man for the job, if it was ever to be, again, would be Boris Johnson.
Yes.
I was just about to say, I knew that there'd be some wincing coming from Joe Phillips when I suggested that, I've got to say. Let me know your thoughts, Nigel.
She's worried by Boris being such a winner, you see. That's the trouble. The opposition want him out because he's such a winner.
Dreadful.
Is he? Is such a winner, is he, everyone? What's your thoughts on that? She says he's a dreadful man. What do you make to Boris Johnson? You'll tell me anyway, because I know lots of you actually rather quite like him.